get a lot of women who thank me for being vulnerable and for my honesty. My best guess is that there are just not enough women willing to share their inner struggles. Fear is probably the biggest contributor to the reason why we don't, but I wanted to know firsthand and to explore this topic of vulnerability more deeply. I have found that most women define vulnerability as being honest. You might be surprised at vulnerability in its entirety, and you might learn something about your own vulnerability as well. I recently invited some of my brave friends over for brunch and to put their vulnerability to the test. How vulnerable are you willing to be about vulnerability? Here's how that discussion went. Women thank me or the team for having a place to be honest and vulnerable. And I keep hearing this word of vulnerability, and it shows up a lot, and especially as women, we're such emotional creatures and beings that sometimes we're vulnerable without knowing we're vulnerable. And I realized that it's taken quite a bit of vulnerability to get you all here to talk about vulnerability. So what I want to start with is asking you each, I've asked you to write down what vulnerability is to you in one word or two words hyphened. So like on the count of three, just lift up your sign and then we're just going to kind of browse the room and kind of take it in for a minute, okay? Everybody ready?
Yeah. I feel like we're on the Newlywed Game.
There's no prizes here, though. There's no prizes, unless you count pancakes. All right, vulnerability is 1, 2, 3.
What do we have here?
Wow. Every word is different. So we've got risk, openness, honest living, extra points for the hyphen.
And only one. Yeah.
Unsafe, beautiful, and brave. All true, all good, all necessary, right? Who would be willing to talk about their definition? Like, let's just jump into this.
Okay, I was thinking about it this morning
Yeah.
at 5 o'clock. And the first word that seriously came to my mind is risk. I think vulnerability is beautiful, but it's always a risk. Yeah. It's, to me, I was rereading your email. You said something about truth and vulnerability. So to me, like, truth would be like, I have something in my teeth. And vulnerability would be, I'm going to still have this conversation with you, knowing that I still got something stuck in my teeth.
With your broccoli.
Right?
Yeah.
But I'm still going to talk with you, and hopefully, because we're good friends, you would either tell me or we'd continue this conversation and you wouldn't say anything about it and it would be fine. Yeah. So I think vulnerability is always a risk. You never know. There's no guarantee of return. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like love. You know, you can give love, but there's never a guarantee. And so vulnerability to me is...
There's never a guarantee.
A return on your investment. So you may be vulnerable with somebody, but that could be rejected.
Yeah.
Or you could never receive the same amount of vulnerability in return.
Yeah. See, and that's so interesting because I think for a long time I thought vulnerability is just being honest, just being open, just allowing your heart to go places. And I started exploring it and I found it's so much more.
It's so deep.
It's so loaded. You used that word last night. It's so loaded. So I want to ask you about your word. Yeah.
Well, it's extremely unsafe. That's why. You can be vulnerable and open yourself up to getting hurt. And like it makes you think of like armies or like the enemy, like whoever your enemy is, like in war they look for the person's vulnerabilities in order to, you know, like overtake them or to get the best of them. So for me it's extremely unsafe because you don't really know what you're going to get when you're vulnerable. Like it's like this abyss. Like you can be vulnerable and then something wonderful can happen or something really awful could happen.
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of like folds into the risk of being vulnerable.
Yeah. And I love it because you're sitting right next to Christy, who wrote beautiful, not only beautiful, but like with cute little flowers.
So stark.
So like there's this huge, paradigm of unsafe and beautiful, but it's so lovely at the same time. It really is.
Because it's multifaceted. I feel like I just told Mickey that there's two sides to every coin. It's unsafe, but it's beautiful. When somebody's vulnerable with me, I consider it a gift, a trust. It's something that I want to reciprocate. So for me, it's risky, but once you do that with somebody you consider safe and you're close to, there can be mutual respect and your relationship grows as a consequence. And I think it probably depends on the relationship that you have with the people around you, how safe vulnerability is. So for me, it just depends on the person you're talking to.
Yeah.
But when somebody is that way with me, I'm over the moon because they trust me enough to give me their heart.
Yeah. So I think it requires a great deal of courage. And maybe just sometimes it's not a requirement, but it comes with a great deal of emotion, maybe even sometimes hormonal, because I hear a lot of women that just start crying and they're like, I didn't mean to say all of this, and there it is, and they're like, I'm not normally like this. And it's either they found a really safe place or they're really hormonal for the moment, which is fine, like they're both okay.
Can I say something though about the safe part? Sorry.
Of course you can.
I don't want to derail where you're going, but and it actually kind of wraps all of them in though, right? Like not to be the first person to Jesus juke the conversation.
Do it.
But I feel like, especially maybe in the last couple of years, like Jesus doesn't call us to be safe.
Right.
Like that's just not what we get.
Yeah.
And I think maybe it's like American culture or whatever, like we idolize safety. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm gonna live in a safe neighborhood and I'm gonna build a safe life for my family and I'm gonna have, we're gonna have this nice house and we're gonna live in a good neighborhood and everything's gonna be safe. And like, but that's not, we don't get that. Like Christianity is not signing up for safe. And so vulnerability, if it's happening in the context, if the requirement is safety, then maybe it's not vulnerability. You know what I'm saying? Let me couple that though with not everybody has the right to hear your story, right? So I'm not saying you go out and you just expose yourself to everyone. Yeah. But there's this for me, it's vulnerability has been about exposing myself to the chance of being happy, because I always tried to save myself from that. I can't be too happy about things because it's going to get destroyed. And so somehow, that was vulnerability to me. Not just exposing a bad part of myself. Fine, I can admit that. But if I admit that you mean a lot to me, well, then it's going to go away. So letting myself have joy is vulnerability for me. Yeah.
And you say safe. And I wonder if when you say safe, does safe and comfortable go hand in hand? Because we want such a comfortable, this couch. I'm not going to buy this couch because it's just not the most comfortable to sit in. I'm going to be sitting a lot. And I want a comfortable, that safe and comfort kind of go hand in hand. And I think you're exactly right. Let's blow up that box and get it over with real quick.
I think though, it's kind of strange to throw out the word safe or think that you're not supposed to be safe, but and this might sound a little trivial, but we grow up with the ideology of being safe. If your kids are playing in the street, come out of the street, that's unsafe. So how is it that we grow up learning safety, but then we're supposed to expose ourselves once we become an adult? I'm not really sure how to where to place that,
Tune in next time as we continue our discussion on vulnerability, on women, body, mind, soul, and spirit.